a couple of team members who are still logging on, and a couple of housekeeping items for our group. Feel free, if you would like, to disable your cameras. The more people that are projecting video, it does affect our bandwidth. We do have two guests who are joining us this afternoon, and they're certainly welcome to leave their video on if they'd like for the presentation to participate in that manner. And I'll introduce them once we officially call the meeting to order. But if you would indulge me, we do have a couple of team members who are still trying to get on, and we'll start in just a few minutes. Thank you. Yes, thank you. Please be sure to mute your microphones when you're not speaking. When you do that, it creates background noise. So thank you for that reminder. Our IMT department is working with Mr. Guttridge, providing assistance so he can join the meeting. And Mrs. McCord has sent notice that she's unable to be with us today. Well, as we are at 4 o'clock, we probably should go ahead and move forward and call the meeting to order. And Marcy Watson will be recording minutes, and please be aware that this meeting will be recorded and is being broadcast and is being streamed on our YouTube channel. I'd also like to acknowledge and thank Robert Oscarson and David Colley, who will be helping us with the technical aspects of this meeting. And we also do have two guests who have joined us today for a presentation, and that is Mr. Dave Peterson of ADM Group, as well as Molly Smith with Think Smart Planning. So they will be joining us for a presentation in just a few minutes. So I'm just going to double check that everyone is ready to go and that Marcy is able to record the minutes. And with that, we'll ask for you to review the meeting minutes from the last time we met. And then if acceptable, for one of our team members to offer a motion to approve those minutes.
Michelle, this is Marcy. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, I'm ready to begin recording minutes. If you could just also put out a reminder for everyone to clearly state their name before they speak, to leave before making or seconding.
Thank you. So Marcy has asked members contribute today because we are using a virtual environment, that the team member identify themselves as they speak or make a motion or approve an action item so Marcy can properly capture the individuals who have participated. Thank you, Marcy.
Michelle, this is Patty Beltram.
Patty.
I have read the minutes of the previous meeting and I move to approve the minutes as typed.
And this is Melissa Briggs. I second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. McCarty.
Aye.
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 Opposed?
Michelle, this is Marcy. I did not hear the motion to call the meeting to order.
Thank you. It does appear that we moved into the minutes without that official motion. So we will have to ask the team to also address that item as well, if we could do that. But we did also have the motion for the minutes. And so Marcy, were you able to capture who made the motion in the second? And will we need to actually redo that? Because in theory, we do need to call the meeting to order. For housekeeping purposes, let's go ahead and call the meeting to order, and then we'll reconvene that vote if we could, please.
This is Melissa Briggs. I move to call the meeting to order.
This is Patty Beltram. I second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, thank you. Now we're officially meeting, and then with that, if we could now address the agenda item to approve the minutes, please.
Michelle, this is Patty Beltram. I move to approve the minutes as typed.
This is Melissa Briggs. I second.
All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. The motion carries. Okay. And I'm just going to do a quick check before we move to our next agenda item, which is the presentation on the district facility utilization and assessment study. I do need to make sure that Robert Oscarson is ready at this point to launch those presentations.
Either that or right in
Yeah,
corner
which
of
one
a
is it?
nice place to sit on a table there somewhere, okay?
This one?
All right, sir. All right. Okay, thanks, Kate.
Yes, Robert, thank you very much for launching the PowerPoint. In addition to the PowerPoint, if our presenters go through the presentation, there are 4 other PDFs that you'll also need to be able to toggle between. There's a methodology and aggregate data file, as well as a 5- and 10-year project file, a priority file, and projects by year. Will actually be 5 documents that our presenters may ask you to refer to during their presentation. So we'll go ahead and get those ready, and then at that point, we'll introduce our 2 guests and turn the meeting over to them for the presentation. Robert, are we able to move on?
Oh, yeah. Can you say that again?
Do you have those documents ready to go and we can start the presentation?
Yes, I have this one open, this one open, this one, and this one, as well as this one.
Perfect. Okay. Well, without further ado, I will introduce person from ADM Group, and then Dave will turn the presentation over to Molly Smith from Think Smart Planning. I'll mute my microphone, and Dave, if you would like to unmute, the floor is yours, sir.
Thank you. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yeah, could I,
Yes.
Michelle, could I say one thing? Danielle Padilla just texted me. She's wondering if you could resend her the link she hadn't heard yet, etc. If someone could send her the link, or I could forward my email if that would work.
I'll do it right now.
Thank you.
Who was it?
Danielle Padilla, Padilla.
Okay, let me find out that person.
Robert, after you find Danielle and send her the meeting invitation, can you put the PowerPoint on the screen, please?
Thanks, Michelle. Are we ready to go?
I believe we are. Thank you, Dave.
You got it. Well, welcome everyone. I'm excited to be here. My name is Dave Peterson. I'm with the ADM Group. I've been in school facilities for over 30 years, and truly school facilities is my passion, and making a difference with facilities to really impact education is important to me. We're going to go over the process overview of what we did, share our findings. Molly's going to share her capacity and utilization findings, and then we'll have Q&A. So Molly, you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. I'm Molly Smith from Think Smart Planning. I'm going to turn it back to you, David.
All right, perfect. So next slide, please. So just as everybody knows, Peoria Unified is sitting up in the northwest part of the valley, 37,000 students, 34 elementary schools, 7 high schools, and a non-traditional high school. Just kind of representative of, there's a lot of facilities out there, and it's hard to believe, but we started this back in October, and we started going through assessing facilities. Molly was meeting with principals, getting demographic work. So this process has been going for quite a while, and we're excited to be able to share our findings with you today. Next slide. So when we talk about a master plan, really, you know, there's multiple components to it, but the master plan defines the facility needs of the districts, and the key to that is assessing the physical condition of all the sites. And as you assess the condition, is determining the needs for any types of repairs, replacements, and then prioritizing those. And we'll share that a little bit later on in the presentation. And then once you do that, is figuring out the actual costs to put that together. Ultimately, this work, and I think it'll hold true at Peoria, goes into the foundations of a bond program. Our goals are to enhance student and employee safety. That's always a goal for us, is safety is number one, and then embracing the whole child and making sure that the facilities do what they need to do to support education. And that's crucial. Also, we want to make sure, just as we're doing today, we get the voices of the neighbors. And we did go out and talk to folks, met with principals and staff, and really make sure, because we know that every school is individual, every school has different programs in it, and that's kind of a unique characteristic of Peoria, is you guys really have done a good job of having your schools fit the programs that are needed there. Next slide. So as we look at our assessment, there's the categories that we go through. Obviously, site improvements, we start there, looking at the site itself, and then moving into the building, architecture and structure, any structural issues, roofs, interior, windows, doors, exteriors. You have some new facilities and you have some aging facilities. And you've got some well-worn facilities. So we need to make sure we understood that. And then looking at the individual systems that run those facilities. So electrical, air conditioning, plumbing, looking at the furniture and fixtures and equipment that are in the programs. And then looking at any other issues that are out there, site fencing, life safety. Flooring is another big one. You've got some schools where you've got flooring that is starting to reach the end of its useful life. And those are things that we need to make sure we note because unfortunately in Arizona, dollars are scarce and we've got to make sure that the dollars are spent wisely and maximize the life. And I can say Peoria's done a good job of that. Next slide. So looking at our goals, first and foremost, the number one was to identify and analyze the information that the district had and document that for the district for their needs. And then create standards to provide equity. I think equity is important. As I said, you have some older schools and some new schools. We'll never make an old school new, but we can make it equitable to the new schools. And that's one of the goals to always keep in mind. And then also understanding that this is an ongoing process. Our goal was to provide a document or a set of documents, and our deliverables were hundreds and hundreds of pages. We did not only assessments, but we did drawings of all the schools and updated all the floor plans and site plans and aerials for the campus. So the district has those to use. And then as we're doing today, communicate out what the needs are going to be. And I think that's important that the community knows what truly are the needs that need to be done. And then finally, being aggressive in funding to be able to find alternative funding, whether it's bonds, go to the school facilities board for things that the school facilities board can fund. What capital dollars can be used, although those are again precious, but take those priorities and maximize the funds to do that. Next slide. So as we look at the aspects of the capacity and utilization, I'm going to turn that over to Molly.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, when we look at the capacity and utilization, we're really going to each school and trying to determine how many student seats are available. And then we look at under utilization, we look at how the school is currently being used so that we can determine whether there is available capacity to bring new students in or whether we're running low on seats and so forth. We use the enrollment trends created by Applied Economics to compare that capacity against the current enrollment. We updated all the building capacities based on current room utilization. We went out and spoke with all the sites. We spoke with the principals and looked at the special programs in each of the schools. Next slide. So some of the goals that we had here, hold on a second, I'm going to advance on my own slide so I can read it all. Some of the goals that we had here were basically creating the data that can be used in when the district is looking at current master plan goals. So whether or not the current utilization is effectively utilized, or whether there's enough space to accommodate growth or in the school population, or if not, what is the best means of resolving the issue? Next slide.
Thanks, Molly. So as we moved into the facility assessments, first we gathered all the documents from the district and went through and saw what the district had for their work orders, for their previous plans, previous bonds, and what work was done on previous bonds in order to reconcile all of that. And then the crucial piece and critical is doing the assessments and trying to get a snapshot in time. And that's really what it is. It's a snapshot in time right now of where the district's at and what things are going. We did this, and you'll see as we get through the presentation today, we looked at a 15-year window, but really a 15-year window is pretty long long. 7 years is probably an ideal. So we broke it down a little further. We took the 15-year window that we looked at and then moved it into 5 and 10-year windows, looking at probably what would be a couple of potential future bonds in order to make that happen. So we assessed the campuses, we assigned costs to them, and then we also looked at any opportunities for creating next generation learning environments. And that's something Molly also looked at as she talked with principals, because principals did a great job of sharing with us what they're doing in their individual programs at their schools. And as we looked at that, we kind of looked at two things. One, property characteristics. That was complete inventory of the buildings. All the individual components, individual air conditioners were accounted for, individual lights were accounted for, all your roofs, all your cabinets, all your flooring, everything was accounted for from property characteristic wise. And then looking at the actual conditions of those systems, and then also taking industry standards to predict the life of those systems. Because, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a few slides, about looking at the life versus running things to failure. Next slide, please. So we kind of envision the process as a map to success. And we started out with an internal kickoff meeting with the district. And we met with the district staff. The maintenance guys were great. They were there to share with us, to help us, to provide information. And so you really have a great maintenance team at Peoria that really cares about the facilities. And then we gathered a lot of background information that everyone had. As I said, we did staff interviews. There were surveys developed that went to every school, every site lead, because those are the folks that are most knowledgeable about their schools. Not only are they passionate about them, but they live those schools. They're there every single day. So not only did we want to see what we saw and record it, we wanted to get the information and input from school staffs. So we did that. And then we had our inspection templates that we verified, because it's important that there's a baseline and there's something that's standard that everybody follows. And so we wanted to make sure that we had something that was defendable and something that was consistent, so that we had a consistent set of assessments across the board. We had our team orientations and sample assessments to make sure that everyone followed the process. And then we actually went out and did, next slide. So as I said, we wanted consistent data. And in order to have consistent data, it's got to be reliable. So we had, one was our grading methodology, and that was a scale of 1 to 5, where 1 was critical, things were extremely worn or damaged, or were a life safety code issue that needed to be taken care of, all the way up to things that were like new or new. There has been bond work done at the district, over $100 million worth of work that's been done in the last several years. So there are some systems that were replaced and brought up to new. Even though the school may be 20 years old, some of the systems within it were replaced. So we made sure that we accounted for that. Next slide. So this is just one of the about 15 different sheets to show you, as we go through our site inspections, all the things that we look at, the actual ratings scales, and then the comments that we put in for all of those. So every school has a packet of inspection reports that were delivered to the district once we finished all of our work, and it's pretty comprehensive. So there's some really good data in there, and we were consistent. So I just wanted to share with you, this is just one page of about 15 pages of our inspection report that we utilize in order to come up with some good, reliable data for the district. Next slide, please. So we've done our research, we've done our facility assessments and gotten all those things done. And then it's time to move forward and look at the master plan part of it, which was really taking each site, looking at the repair and renovations and putting costs to those. So those were our next steps after we did all the initial research and did our assessments, was to move into the master plan part of it and put the costs and the rankings of priorities into things. Next slide. So I talked a little bit earlier about looking at things from different points of view, and we take the industry standards of life cycle, and this graph kind of shows the cliff. Unfortunately, in schools, a lot of times we'll run systems to failure. It's just because of the budgets and we can't do it. In the military, you know, or even in the airlines, once an airplane has 2,000 hours on it, they automatically take it out of service and do inspections and repairs and replacements. We don't have that luxury in schools because we don't have the budget. So we kind of have to understand that there is a cliff out there, and where is that sweet spot? So sometimes we may actually say that a system needs to be replaced because the industry standards tell us, you know, it's past its useful life. But in reality, in a school, we're going to get another 5 to 10 years out of those things. So we also try to balance that as we go through and do our overall master plan. Next slide. So on the next several slides, you'll see I took Altaloma and used it as the, just to show you some examples. So this, based on putting our master plan together, this is the next set of documents that we go into, and we have spreadsheets and tables that break everything down by components, individual items, the description of what needs to be done, the type of work, the cost, the unit costs, the footage, and then priorities. You can see on the far right, there's priorities for low, medium, and high. The year it was installed, again, you can see at Altaloma, there was some work done in 2018, and then there was work that was done in 1996 when the school was originally built. So we have and again, these spreadsheets are pretty voluminous. There's quite a few for each campus, and the district has all of that data in order to then refine it up into the actual reports. Next slide. So all that data you just saw moves into this spreadsheet that is kind of rolls everything up. And as you can see, we took over 15 years the costs of the different components. So at Altaloma, it's 87,320 square feet. It's a one-story facility, K8. Its replacement value is $18.6 million. And then this is all of the work that needs to be done over the next 15 years based on our inspections and the industry standards of when things should be replaced. So at Altaloma, about $8 million worth of work needs to be done over the next 15 years. So you can look at something now and think, there, that component is good right today, but in 10 years, it's definitely going to wear out. So it's got to be planned for replacement, and that's what we look at. The bottom of the spreadsheet shows that in the last 7 years, there's been $3 million spent on facility improvements and upgrades at Altaloma, and then it lists the various upgrades and components that were done there. Next slide. Then this is the actual final facility report for Altaloma. So we start out and we show when the campus was built, its square footage, its site. We have an actual aerial photo of the campus so people can understand what that campus looks like from a footprint standpoint, the number of buildings, and then each of the individual buildings, that table that you see on there comes from what the database is with the school facilities board. So we actually mirror what we have with the school facilities board, because as the district tries to go to get building renewal dollars and those types of things, you have to make sure that you're following the school facilities board's format. So we make sure we marry to that. So this is the first page of a multi-page executive summary, if you will, for each of the campuses. And we did that for every campus. Next slide. And then kind of the last page of that summary for that campus, again, talks 7 years, there was $3 million done. And then over the next 15 years, $8 million worth of work needs to be considered for that campus at Altaloma. And those are the major components are listed there of things that need to be upgraded or replaced. So this type of a report we did for every single campus that you have out there. Next slide. And then we talked a little bit about prioritization. One of the things that was important was, you know, there's a lot of work that needs to be done, but is it really a priority? So we then grouped things into different priorities, and you'll see a table in a little bit that shows some of those priorities. But priorities 1, 2, and 3, and what the descriptions are as to why they got ranked for those different priorities. Next slide. So here at Altaloma, this is the sheet that shows all of the high priority items. So everything that's considered a high priority is broken out and further drilled down on, so that you can see, and we did this for the high priority, medium priority, low priority. So you can go in and get a feel for what the different projects are for each of those priority items. Next slide. So we've done our research, we did our assessments, we've gotten the master plan put together with all of the projects, all of the cost, all the priorities, and then kind of finalization and implementation. And that's where we're moving to now, is what's going to get done and how is it going to get funded. So that's kind of the final step, where we pass it off to you as a committee for consideration and to the district. And we are here to support you all the way through. Next slide. This was just wanted to share with you, this was the cover of the facility plan. Again, those documents were hundreds of pages for each one of those. And then we had a separate set of documents of all the new drawings that we did for the schools. So that way the schools can use them for all their new emergency plans for exiting, for the fire departments. It has all of the current rooms with all of the new room numbers, because room numbers have changed over time. And we were able to update fully the set of plans for the district. Next slide. So this slide shows you then rolling up for each school as a total for the whole district, all of the work that needs to be done over the next 15 years. And that total down on the bottom right is $301 million worth of work that needs to take place across the district, elementary, high school, and district facilities. Next slide. And as I said, we took the high, medium, and low priorities and broke those out. So you can see that for high priority projects, there's $9 million worth of work that needs to take place for high priority items, 190 million for medium priority, and then $23.6 million of low priority projects. Next slide. Molly, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you, David. So when we look at facilities for what we call educational adequacy, the purpose of that is to determine the enrollment capacity and the way the school is being utilized. Capacity would refer to the number of students a school can reasonably accommodate under normal use. Utilization refers to how the building is currently being used, whether the current enrollment is under, low, or near capacity or highly utilized. And so we looked at room type, room sizes, general functionality, administration, number, size of classrooms, libraries, physical education spaces, cafeterias, and also specialty rooms. Next slide. The methodology that we use for this study is basically what we call a snapshot in time. In other words, the data we were given in late 2019 drove our data charts that you would see in the document that you were provided called methodology. And it's called methodology and data. Everybody should have gotten a copy. And so you can really read through that and see the details of what methodology we used to produce these numbers. We met with the staff and the administrators. We met with the principals on site to look at the schools in detail. We reviewed the documentation in terms of each school campus floor plan, and we looked at modifications of each campus. We also discussed current enrollment and special programs with the principals. And then we were able to determine a maximum permanent capacity. That's permanent space, not portables. We gave a maximum portable plus permanent capacity. And then we gave a recommended permanent capacity depending on the programs in each of the schools. We also provided an educational adequacy chart or floor plan showing room use at each of the schools, so you can see how the schools are being used. Next slide. Data analysis. So basically what we have mentioned in our report is that there's several different ways to create capacity in schools. And one of the ways is utilized by the Arizona School Facilities Board, which is a little bit misleading in terms of the way they do it because it's based purely on square footage. And so if you have a district with schools of many different age groups, as we do in Peoria, when you're basically just taking square footage, some schools don't have any interior corridors, some have more, some have larger classrooms, some have smaller. And so really you get a general sense of what the capacity is, but it's not exact. And so the way that we analyze data is that we count the number of teaching stations that are present in every school building. We calculate the capacity based on the number of students that will be taught based on the district's pupil teacher ratio, which they have adopted. And then we apply efficiency ratios. And then lastly, we modify for special programs as needed. Next slide. So just showing you here a couple different floor plans, 2 different schools. On the left, we have Alta Loma Elementary School. On the right, we have Apache. And you can see that on the left, there are no interior corridors, as would be colored in pale yellow. And on the right, we have quite a few interior corridors. So you can tell that if we were calculating capacity on square footage, we would get 2 different, very different numbers for those 2 campuses. Next slide. Here, basically providing you or showing you the capacity grade level maximum sizes that we use for this study. The capacity was determined by reviewing the original documents for the room, counting each room that was clearly sized to be used as a classroom, and multiplying that by the average number of students in the chart you see, and the average number is 32 students per teacher. And then one note that we make at the bottom of this slide is that maximum permanent capacity, when we make that first number, is never recommended. You would never fill a school to 100% utilization. That would be considered overcrowded. Next slide. So you can just see here an example of how that might work. We look at the floor plan. All the green X's are general classrooms multiplied by 32. And then the orange X's are rooms that are clearly kindergarten rooms. They have toilets associated with them, and they are multiplied by 24 because kindergarten is counted at a different ratio in the district. Next slide. So the maximum permanent capacity, including portables, is also included in our charts, but I will note that the Arizona School Facilities Board does not include portable buildings in their calculations of portable capacity. Next slide. The recommended capacity or for permanent space is reduced by the applicable efficiency factor on each campus. And we apply efficiency factors in a couple different ways. One, at the kindergarten through 5th grade level, we are applying a multiple of 90% to account for the varying number of students at each grade level. So K through 5 grades are considered to be 1 room per 1 teacher, no teachers using that room when the students are going off to specials such as music or art or PE. But the 90% accounts for the fact that our students don't come to us in perfect packages of 32. So we are going to have some inefficiency when we load those classrooms. At the 6th through 8th grade level, we are multiplying the maximum permanent capacity by an efficiency factor of 80%. Because of the block schedule model used at this level in PUSD. We do have some 5th grades using the block model as well. In the 9th through 12th grade, we're using an efficiency factor of 75% to account for the block scheduling that's used in the high schools in Peoria. The students are in class for 3 blocks, and then the teacher is off for 1 block working on teacher planning. It should be noted that at this point, recommended capacities will provide the district with general guidance on how many students a school could accommodate per the statutory mandate. In other words, the K through 12 range. The composition of this student body is based on an average mixture of special ed, regular ed, and special programs. And when we see a school that is not average or outside those norms, then we apply some a little bit of adjustment factor. Next slide. One of the adjustment factors that we apply is when we see a higher number of self-contained special ed classrooms in a school, and that means that school is accommodating a special self-contained program, and so we will basically deduct capacity based on the number of self-contained rooms that are housed at a school for that reason. Next slide. For pre-K, because Peoria offers pre-K as a service to its district on a first-come, first-served basis, we are basically adjusting for capacity as well if a school has a number of pre-K classrooms. Next slide. Utilization percentage. So for elementary schools, I'm giving a detailed, on this slide, I'm giving a detailed explanation for you on how we come up with the utilization percentage. I'll let you peruse that at your own leisure by looking at the document provided to you. But basically, we are taking enrollment and dividing that by the capacity that we found after it's been adjusted to give you a utilization percentage on each of the schools. At the high school level, of course, we're not adjusting for pre-K, we are adjusting for special programs though. And so when we basically categorize a school in terms of utilization, we say that overcapacity is utilized over 100%. A school nearing capacity is utilized at 100 to 87.5. Low capacity is utilized at 87.5 to 75%, and under capacity schools are utilized under 75%. Next slide. So you can see the columns there that I was describing. You'll see those on page 5 of your methodology report that we sent to you. This explains what each of those columns is in that report. Next slide. Here's a screenshot of the report. Obviously, it's way too small for you to read all that, but you can look at that on the slide that we gave you. We have a couple of these in that methodology section of the report. One is the capacity that we've given by area, and I'll show you on the district boundary map in a minute. And the other is capacity by age of school. And so we grouped it in a couple different ways to provide you with some information on which schools are over capacity, under capacity, and so forth by age group or by area of the district. Next slide. So you can see that we have a current enrollment of 3,532 students, a maximum permanent capacity of 57,100 students, a recommended capacity of 47,429 students. And then when we adjust for special programs, that recommendation drops to 44,831 students. The total number of open seats is 7,094 students, or 16%. More seats are open at the elementary level. The high school has very few seats open at 2%. Next slide. So you can see here the area map that we gave you. These areas roughly coordinate with the areas that are used in the demographic report by Applied Economics. On the elementaries, you can see in the center of the district and the northwest that we have a high concentration of schools nearing capacity and over capacity at this time. In the southeast of the district, we have schools that are underutilized. Next slide. For the high schools, we have quite a bit of red on the map. Most all the high schools are overutilized at this point, with just one school, Peoria, I believe that is underutilized. So we have most pressure happening at the high school level. Next slide. So in conclusion, the schools to the north and the west of the district are nearing or over capacity. You can see listed on here each of the areas we talk about the area utilization, which you can read more at your leisure in the report. Next slide. And in general, when we look at the same set of data in age, we find that our older elementary and high schools have lower utilization levels, basically underutilized for the schools that are in the 1920s to 1970s. And then the utilization factors go up per our newer schools, which basically coincides with the way the district has gone to the north and to the west. Next slide. Okay. And that concludes the capacity portion. David, I think I'll let you take it for fielding questions.
Thanks, Molly. And again, you know, we presented a lot of information to you that in a short amount of time that it's taken us months and months to gather. So we appreciate the work that you guys are doing, and we would like to answer any questions or take any comments that any of you have.
Hello, this is Patty. Hi, can you hear me, David?
Yes, we can hear you.
Excellent. I have a question. We don't have the full report. The sheet that's most interest to me, there is a spreadsheet. It lists all the schools, what their capacities are. Is there a way, even in that PDF that I have, I'm not able to read that in detail. Can we receive that report?
Robert, would you please pull up the PDF that Dr. Belcher was referring to, please?
Page 5.
Oh, page 5.
Of the first one you had up, the methodology report. No, yeah, there.
This one?
Yep. So here, what we'll have to do, Michelle, I'm not sure how you want to do that, but at home you can take that page 5 and enlarge it and go through it on your own screen. I don't know if you can do that, Robert. Start enlarging that screen. There you go. We're not getting all of it, but there you go. And so you'll be able to go through that and take a look at each of the schools, the maximum capacity, recommended, the adjustment factors we have, and so forth. And then on the right side, you'll see the where we've categorized each school as underutilized or overutilized and so forth. Does that help at all?
Yes, that is the one that I wanted to see more detail on. Michelle, do you think we'll get a copy of that report or just the slides that were in the packet?
For this meeting, we've distributed the slides that are in the packet that support the presentation. The full report's with administration.
This is Ray Connolly. Can you hear me?
Hi, Ray.
Hi. So I guess my question is are there recommendations that are made by the company about how we can better utilize our schools? For example, perhaps a certain program shouldn't be at a school, maybe it should move to another place. Are those kinds of recommendations made by the company?
And I'll direct that question to Molly. I know that Molly can talk about next steps from a master planning perspective. But Dave, I'm curious, do you want to, for the benefit of the group, to look at the separate attachments that you sent with the priorities broken out in the 5 and 10 year planning horizons, as well as by age of school and priority, just as a point of reference, which also becomes part of a master planning activity? And as the committee considers a critical bond threshold outside of new construction, perhaps how the information that ADM and Think Smart Planning has compiled help with recommendations for perhaps a critical needs bond and next steps for master planning.
Sure, and thank you for that question. As Michelle said, we did take all of our work and we took it by priority, but then we also broke it into that 1 to 5 and basically 6 to 10 year windows from those larger spreadsheets to show the individual projects at each school to kind of make it a little more manageable dollar-wise. But I think the question you're asking again is something that's probably a much deeper discussion that going into the facilities and saying, okay, based on what's been determined for capacity and utilization, how do we maybe have some more additional programs to bring some more students in that maybe have gone to charter schools or from open enrollment come outside the district? So that is an important discussion that needs to take place, but I think that's a much larger discussion that you know, Molly can probably talk a little more too. But we have taken the facility side of it and broken out the dollars based on priorities and years to try to put, if you were to look at what would be a manageable bond over the 2 bond programs, that's what we tried to do. But then looking at the actual facility use for programs is something that I think you know, the governing board and district staff and superintendent are going to have a discussion on as to what do they want to do for innovative programs, or you know, to right size the school and to make sure that those are used appropriately. Molly, you want to add anything to that?
Okay, so Ray, your question cut out right when you were saying it. If you could repeat it again.
So my question, thank you, Molly, is that have you made any recommendations in terms of utilization? Which campuses could afford to have special programs that perhaps need to be moved from other campuses? That sort of thing. I'm always thinking about the traditional school, for example. You know, is Coyote Hills the right place for that? Do you get that specific, or are you just kind of handing over the data and saying, okay, district administration and board, now here it is, you need to figure it out from there?
Well, yes and no. This data and the data that David's presenting today are what I call 3 of the 4 legs that you need in a master plan, and you've now got the data that you need to start working on your master plan priorities. You really can't you can't ask for a bond just on facility analysis, like the facility information, or just the capacity analysis, or even just your growth information from your demographics report. You really need to basically put those 3 things together to help you make some decisions. One of the things that capacity will definitely help you do is if you're looking at a school that has growing enrollment and it's in the northwest part of your district and it's really bumping up against its capacity, and you have special programs there, such as a special ed program and a pre-K program, you may want to find another place for that that's nearby, or, somehow free up that space. So that's one way to use capacity information. Another way to use capacity information is that if you see a trend like in the southeast portion of the district, you may want to start thinking about policies such as, schools being consolidated together, or maybe that's an area that you would bring in magnet programs to help fill those seats while you're doing other things in the north part of the district. So we did not specifically go in and say that we think the district should do really X, Y, or Z, but we felt like that you needed to have the real data at your fingertips in order to start making these decisions. So that's really where we're at right now.
Thank you. That does answer my question.
And this is Michelle. I'll ask Robert, would you be able to launch the PDF that has priority in its name, please, for reference? I'd like to ask Dave to perhaps highlight when he talks about possibly 2 bond programs, how ADM took that 15-year planning horizon and broke it down to help identify what's the most critical and urgent costs to address in the next few years. And I believe that is the slide.
Well, this is the high priority, medium priority, and low priority. And basically, that's taking all of the projects and ranking them on the priorities as a whole, as what needs to be done. So, and if you look at the totals on those, the bottom, the high priority is $9 million and the medium's 190. So those two together is about 199, almost $200 million. And then the low priority is 23. And then on top of that, you have your actual soft costs. So that's your design costs, your fees, insurance, and bond, and everything else. And that's where it rolls up to the 301 million. I think what's probably a better look at is the table that has the 5 and 10-year projects on it. So now there's another one that's, yes, that one right there. So that one's probably a better table for looking at 2 distinct bond programs. Years 1 to 5 are not only high priority items, because high priority items naturally get put into things that need to be done within the first couple of years, because the nature of it, they're high priority. And then after that, it's things that are starting to age out, or things that right now are on the cusp of needing replacement, but they're going to last a few more years. And so based on that, and all the work that was done on the major spreadsheets for the different years, we took and rolled up into the 1 to 5 year program and a 6 to 10 year program. And so in looking at that, then the 1 to 5 year is about $131 million. And then a second program for years 6 to 10 is $125 million. So that's probably a better indication of looking at taking priorities, because the high priorities was about $10 million. But looking at that as a whole and saying these are the most important things, not only based on priority, but on year of when they need to be replaced. And sometimes even that's predictive, because as you're looking at when it needs to be replaced, it may all of a sudden just fail, and then you got to scramble and try to get reserves. So hopefully you don't have many of those, but some of those do occur. So I think this is a better table to look at in looking at a couple of packaged bond programs.
This is Melissa Briggs. Could I ask a question?
Of course.
I'm looking at that chart. I guess I'm just looking for more insight. In the year 1 of projects, if you look down, you'll see Liberty High School and Raymond S. Kellis High School. And I guess I'm just curious if you know why there's such a drastic difference in dollar amounts, since those two schools were built relatively at the same time and they have almost the exact same footprint also.
Well, again, I'm looking at it. Raymond S. Kellis is about 1.3 million for the years 1 to 5, and Liberty's 2.9. Part of that is there has been some work done, bond work at a couple of the campuses that took care of some items that the other one hadn't had replaced yet. So that's part of what's happened, and then other part is just overall usage and condition.
Michelle, this is Annette McCarty. I had, could you remind us of the horizon that a bond is leveraged over? Is that about a 10-year time span? And that would mean that those priority slides of anything falling between 1 and 10 years needs basically immediate, that number needs to be the critical needs number?
Thank you, Annette. Yes, it's in statute actually when you have a bond authorization that the bonds within that authorization need to be sold within 10 years. Also, there is an expectation when you have a bond sale that the proceeds will be expended within 3 years. And the reason for that is they are tax exempt bonds, and anything beyond 3 years can jeopardize the tax exempt nature of the bond sale. But 10 years is typically that planning horizon when there's an authorization, and the timing as well as the size of the bond sales is built within that planning horizon.
And if I could go back really quick to follow up on that question between Kellis and Liberty High School, looking at, I just pulled up my reports for Kellis. In the last 7 years, there was $4 million of facility improvements and upgrades that were spent there to take care of things. And looking at Liberty, there was $1.5 million. So there was $2.5 million more spent at Kellis in the last 7 years, replacing things that obviously Liberty is going to need to have replaced also, but they weren't replaced. So that takes care of some of the discrepancy there.
Thank you.
David?
Yes.
Yeah, I have a question. If we could go back to that map you showed us and just kind of tell us where it is that those areas that are, what the boundary is. You know, you said north and west, but what's the boundary where the schools start to really get heavily populated as compared to the schools further south? I know you showed us the map really quickly, but you really can't tell the areas where that starts, where the schools start to get more populated. Right there. Yeah.
So yeah, so Molly, you can talk to this. This is the elementary, and then the high school is on the other one.
Okay.
But if you can see, the red is overutilized, and then the pink color is nearing capacity. So that kind of gives you an idea that yellowish colored, mustard colored one down in your south east part of your district, your older original part of your district for elementary schools. Those are the ones that have capacity. They're underutilized. And then up in your northwest quadrant, that's where your new growth is happening, is overutilized because they're full. And I think what you're seeing in part of that is you're seeing part of those aging neighborhoods. So in the older part of the district, you have neighborhoods that are well established. People moved in there, their kids went to schools there, their kids grew up, they graduated, but the people didn't sell their homes. And so they're still living in those neighborhoods, and you don't have new families moving in, and you're not having that neighborhood turnover. So those schools aren't getting replenished as they would if you had neighborhood turnover occurring.
So that area in orange next to the area, those two areas, gosh, the ones that look like it's underutilized, and you have the two red areas where it's overutilized, and then you have that one section, thank you. And then you have that one section right next to it towards the bottom that says underutilized, and I guess that's number, is it 18?
Yes.
What boundaries are those?
Those are the boundaries for each individual school. They correlate with your
Yeah.
boundary map. Mm-hmm.
Okay,
So number
and
8,
I can't see that. Yeah, I can't see that.
I see. I don't.
It's
That's in.
Apache.
It's Apache. Okay.
18's
Okay.
Apache.
18's Apache. Okay, I was just wondering where it is that the they start nearing capacity and then underutilization. So basically, it's the area south of Bell Road where we start seeing more schools that are being underutilized. Okay.
Well, and you have to also realize there's several factors here that may drive a school underutilized or overutilized. For instance, they may be accommodating special programs that are taking up some of their area, but definitely where you see the red and the pink, and then up towards the north, those areas are all those schools are headed towards overutilization in the district.
Mm-hmm. Right, okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
But Molly, I think that's a good point, and perhaps you can elaborate on mitigating factors, and you touched on them during your presentation, but special programming inputs as well as those mitigating factors that might contribute to why space is not being used in a different way. If you want to summarize that for the group, please.
Mm-hmm. Certainly. So once we step outside of looking at a school just sort of in its normal utilization, which really takes into account a normal mixture of special ed students and other programs in a school, then we start looking at special circumstances. And a number of our schools have special programs, especially self-contained programs for students with autism, a variety of special ed programs that are being housed at different campuses. And then secondly, some of our schools have a pretty high number of pre-K classrooms. Some of those classrooms are community pre-K, some are developmental, which is our special needs pre-K. And those, anytime that we have those programs on a campus, obviously they're taking up a classroom, and so that lowers a school's available capacity to accommodate new students. But it does give the district some information about if they need to move those programs or put them at a campus that has more space. This data gives that information to the district.
Do we have, this is Kirk Hobbs, do we have information on where those programs are at, meaning the committee?
Absolutely. If you look at in detail the report, or the section of report we sent you, we were looking at the chart a few minutes ago in the methodology section. Okay. You will see each school individually, and it shows how much capacity is being basically used by those special mitigating factors. Okay. Yeah, right, in that chart. Yeah, yeah.
I have some other questions. I think it was Molly had mentioned that we had one underutilized high school, but it appears we actually have two. Because I think Cactus is also considered underutilized, right?
Can we see the next slide, the high school slide? There we go. Let's see. I don't have my chart right in front of me, but we do have Peoria as, I believe, underutilized. Number somebody tell me which one number 2 is and,
Yeah, that appears to be Cactus. Yeah.
Has to be
okay.
Cactus.
Number 2 is
Yeah.
Cactus.
Cactus, okay. And then, yeah, that's the only one that's underutilized at this point. Cactus is, got, has some available seats, but when we look at all of the high schools together, and it's important to do that because we can move our high school boundaries a little bit easier than we can elementary boundaries. We only have, across the board, we only have 200 available seats. And most of the high schools are basically in the deficient range. They're under, they have a negative number of seats.
I see.
This is Melissa Briggs. What he's referring to is area /1/7. That says Peoria High School and the Peoria Flex Academy. It's showing it as underutilized also.
Yeah, she had mentioned that Peoria, but we didn't mention Cactus. I do have another.
I stand corrected. Sorry about that.
Yeah. Do we have the ability to assess if a campus has space for adding permanent classroom? Or are we to assume that all of the schools that are overutilized don't actually have space to be able to do that?
Are you talking about having an addition on campus?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
Is the question you're asking, do they have space for an addition on their campus?
Yes.
David will know more about that in terms of the site, but I will tell you that when I looked at all of the high schools, one of the biggest factors you do have to look at is core facilities. Do you have the library, the dining, the admin? Those core facilities have to be able to accommodate an addition. And in my opinion, the schools that are overutilized at this point have stretched to their limit in terms of using core facilities. So I wouldn't recommend that you do an addition there, and unless you were putting in money to expand those core facilities as well.
Well, that's good to know, because I think at one point we had discussed that idea for Liberty of doing an add-on, but it sounds like there's more to it than just simply adding classroom space. Also, was the Challenger Center assessed?
Yes, it was.
And we did include it in our capacity analysis as well.
And we updated the drawings because it was completely renovated to put the arts programs in over there. And so it's, the rooms were switched around to have the different studios and things that are in there from the high school. And it's basically an annex now of the high school that's got their art programs in.
So it's actually added to Sunrise then?
Yes.
Because I was looking for it and I didn't see it. Okay. And then other question I have is you had mentioned early on the next generation learning environment. Is that just a general term, or are there some more specifics to what that means?
Well, I think we're experiencing it right now with what's happening with the schools, being shut down and distance learning and those types of things. We're going to have to have more facilities to be able to do some of those things, which means not only the infrastructure for bandwidth, but different classrooms and abilities for students to come in and learn in a little different areas. So, I think that in flexible space so that students can do more group and project work. And I think that's going to happen moving forward. So again, it's a philosophy of how the district is going to support that. I know you have some principals that are moving forward with doing some of that project-based learning. So that takes some additional space because you also have to have the visual ability to monitor students if they're outside of the classroom area doing some of that work.
I see. So it's more defined by up-to-date technology and flexible class space.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Michelle, this is Annette McCarty. One statistic that is jumping off the page really is that high school need for a high school, and that you've talked about the school facilities board, that being our best chance of getting money from the Arizona School Facilities Board. You know, we could tweak a little bit and move maybe something like our special programs of MET and Flex over to Cactus, which seems to have possibly have some utilization space, although I know that they've run some other adult special education programs there too. So that's probably, I don't know how well that is reflected. But the big question being is, you know, even if we're losing our K-8 to surrounding charter schools, they're coming back in high school. Can we get money from the state?
Thank you for that question. And the committee may recall in past presentations, we had Steeple, Nicholas and Company present on the school facilities board funding process, and we had our applied economics presentation related to enrollment and growth. And during those meetings, we did talk about, with our current state, that we would qualify for a new high school well before a new elementary school based on our enrollment and projected growth factors. And so the district's aware of this. But I'll also add a comment now. Those presentations were prior to the COVID-19 crisis taking hold, and I cannot state whether or not the funding of the SFB will continue in the way it has over the last couple of years because of the budget shortfalls that the state is projecting and just published last week. So some of those optimistic potential outcomes with the growth for new high school, perhaps, from a funding perspective, I can't say whether or not the funding opportunity will be there as we thought it might have been in early March.
So Michelle, this is Ben Barcone with the ADM Group. I've been listening in as well. Let me just bring you up to date. Maricopa just got awarded $22 million from the SFB for a new high school. Queen Creek got $44 million for high school. Tolleson got $48 million. Unfortunately, a high school today costs a minimum of about $80 million. So in the case of Maricopa, you can imagine 22 million is not going to go a long ways.
Yes, Mr. Barcone, thank you for that comment. The committee is aware that whenever there is SFB funding, it's never at a level to build an adequate high school. And in years past, the district has always augmented the funding we've received. But that's an excellent point. My comment was funding levels are appropriated year by year, and we're kind of in an uncharted territory right now with some of the forecasts with the state. Are there any other questions from the committee for Molly or Dave?
Michelle, can you hear me? This is Jan.
Hi, Jan.
Okay, so what are we deciding here? Because I understand the utilization levels of all the schools, but it's not our determination as to how to reutilize some of the underutilized spaces, is it?
The scope of the committee is simply to make a recommendation on a bond authorization election question and/or maintenance and operations override question. So you're correct, Jan. Some of the next steps, and Molly alluded to this as well, with the master planning function and activity that very well could be recommended as a future group from the governing board and administration to study those next steps. The information shared today is to help the committee rather, to perhaps refine a dollar amount for a bond authorization if that's the recommendation, and to perhaps delineate between a critical needs bond and a comprehensive bond.
Correct. But my sense is that if we're looking at an underutilized school or a school with low utilization, and we look at the demographics going forward, and those schools are going to increase their underutilization, then there might be something other that we could do with those spaces. Perhaps like someone mentioned, combining schools and that, but that's not really what we're doing here. And I feel like we're kind of moving into a space where we're trying to figure out how to use those underutilized spaces. And I don't think that's where we should be going.
I recommend that we actually Jan's question and discuss in a future meeting, because I think it's a good question, but I'm not certain that it's something we should be trying to answer right now. That we table it.
Correct.
Hello, everyone. This is Rick Guttridge, if everyone can hear me. Jane, to address your question, I think that's a good point and a good question to bring up. And I'm just wondering if as we look at the utilization data, does that not, if we're the ones who are looking at that in great detail, would it not make sense for us to look at it and say, hey, well, we saw this and this is what we would recommend based on having reviewed that data? I'm not necessarily saying we should do that. I'm just saying that seems like that would be a natural fallout from the work we would do if we go study this data in detail.
I agree with Jan and Rick that I think that question is a critical part of the decision that we make. But again, I think that I'm just wondering if that question is something we should table for another meeting, because as Michelle, how did you put the two different bonds? You put one as how did you describe them?
Thank you. I use the term critical needs bond compared to a comprehensive bond, which would include new school construction.
Right.
And so later in the agenda, there is an agenda item that allows for requests for future agenda items. And the scope of the committee is somewhat defined. And I know in past meetings, we've talked about what that scope is. And this information may be helpful as we agendize conversation points for next time we meet on seeing what might be considered a priority project versus something that's more long-term. And as we reconcile this information today back to what we've learned from applied economics and then tax rate factors that we've been given, and bonding capacity limits and things of that nature, it would allow the committee to start taking all of those puzzle pieces to come up with a recommendation on whether or not it's a critical needs bond. How does that relate to the override percentage, 2 ballot questions versus 1, those types of things.
So Michelle, this is Jan again. So we had talked about the idea that the district could set up another committee to talk about some of the underutilized schools and the possibility of consolidating 3 into 1 and that sort of thing. In the 1 to 5 critical needs years, are those, can we just use those to keep those schools, that those particular schools that may be under consideration, to code and for the safety of the students and the staff? And in the meantime, have a separate committee that discusses a consolidation in the future?
The governing board can certainly convene a new committee to look at those types of questions, facility utilization, as well as options with existing schools and buildings.
Michelle, this is Annette McCarty again. Has the governing board, has this presentation been given to the governing board regarding the utilization of the schools?
The materials were shared with our governing board, and I should note, and I apologize, I should have acknowledged this at the beginning of the meeting. In addition to our committee members, we have some guests who have connected with us, and we are also broadcasting on YouTube for our community to also be part of this meeting. But we do have 3 of our governing board members who are listening, and we did notice that quorum appropriately with the agenda, but we do have our board president, Mr. David Sandoval, board clerk, Corey Underhill, and Mrs. Seja Martinez have joined us and they just heard the presentation and are also able to hear the committee's questions.
Hey, Michelle, this is Rick again. I want to go back to Jan's last comment, and I think again she makes a good point. The only question I have is one of timing. How long would it take the committee to come up with recommendations on how to utilize the underutilized schools, and how long would it take to identify which ones are going to get funding to keep them up to code, which I think if you've got a school open, it needs to be up to code, I think. So just in terms of timing for a bond that might go on the ballot in 2020, do we have time to get all that done, and what needs to happen to make sure that if we go down that path, we do have the time to get a correct answer out of whatever committees are going to make the decisions and recommendations to the board? I think we're going to have to do this pretty fast if that's the path we're going to go.
I agree, timing is critical. Looking at the calendar, we have an April 23rd governing board meeting and then 2 meetings currently scheduled in May. And we know we have a requirement to notify Maricopa County elections no later than June 6th for our intention to have a ballot question in November of 2020. And so the information that's presented today does help identify where there would be an opportunity for a critical needs bond. And if there is a separate committee that looks at utilization and opportunities with some of our campuses that do have the lower utilization rates, that might be a factor for a separate ballot question or bond, because I do agree with your comment. There's not a lot of time to also consider the override, which is so critical to the decision-making process for the November election.
So Michelle, what would the amount for a critical needs bond be for the next 1 to 5 years? Would it be 100 million? I mean, give me a number.
Well, I think that would be agendized for our next meeting, where we can start looking at bond authorization amounts and compare that to tax rates, as well as start to correlate the override question and tax rates as well.
This is Kirk Hobbs. Out of respect for our guests, Are we done with this presentation?
Well, I believe we might be. We asked the committee if they had any final questions. Are there any questions for our presenters specifically on their presentations?
Good information. Thank you.
Thank you
Thank you
for
very much.
your presentation.
Yes, thank you.
Michelle, I've got a question for you real quick.
Do we need to include that question as part of this agenda item? Because if you
No.
can, the presentation, we'll have to make sure your question's agendized.
It's just a general question.
Excuse
You had
Go ahead.
mentioned that we need to notify Maricopa County by the end of May, right?
We have a legal requirement to notify them by June 6th. I've previously said our
By June
government
6th.
board need to vote by the end of May.
Okay, so there's been no discussion about moving dates further out because of this situation that we're in right now?
Well, why don't we perhaps under the agenda item for future agenda items,
Okay.
that is maybe a discussion point for the next time we meet?
All right.
Armando, your video is on.
Okay. It is. Well, you don't want to see me or what?
Well, we can see what you're doing.
I'm cleaning my glasses because I can't see my screen and there.
Okay, well, at this point, I'd like to formally thank our two guest presenters, and we appreciate the information they've shared. Thank you very much, Dave and Molly. Okay, so with that, if we refer to our agenda, our next item, agenda item number 4, is public comment. And because we are using a virtual format, we have mirrored the approach we've used for our governing boards, our governing board meeting rather, where we have published a form to our community and a set time where community members could submit comments, public comments, and then they would be read during the meeting. So we did publish that. And as I understand it from Marcy Watson, there were no public comment forms submitted. Is that correct?
That's correct, Michelle.
Okay, thank you. So now we'll move on to agenda item number 5, which is revisit prior agenda items. Would any board member like to go back to a prior agenda item? This is a standing agenda item that we have each meeting. Hearing none, and we'll move on to requests for information and future agenda items. And if I may note that there were a few action items noted in the minutes that the committee approved today, and Mr. Dogood and I will bring those items back to you the next time we meet, and the meeting is actually scheduled for next week. And with that, are there any new requests for agenda items? I know we started to talk about that earlier, so the opportunity for the committee to formally request those items.
Michelle, not a request. This is Mike Barola. Hello, everybody. Good evening. Hope everybody's doing well. Are we spinning our wheels? The point being, if we are going to look no longer at a bond, are we going to take considerations into just stepping that information aside, moving on to override, that type of thing? I'm just curious as to kind of what the pulse is of everybody on where we are. And if we're going to be looking at bond and continue looking at bond, yet not go and approach or deliver to our governing board for recommendation, can we move forward with this? Is there a way that we can look at, maybe if it's not today, to look at what the pulse is, and should we just move forward? Again, time being of the essence, preparation, getting ourselves prepared to deliver what we can to the public, taking all things into concern, especially this COVID-19 situation and circumstance in which we are currently dealing with. The sensitivity to the matter of, are we looking at our public? What are they going to say? Ask for both. How are they going to look at that? Considering
A lot of people financially are, in trouble, struggling. And this time, we need to kind of also feel that and to determine how we best move forward, checking ourselves in the light, because how we present ourselves right now in this time of crisis will certainly reflect how they look upon us down in the future. My concern is simply that, can we maybe take a pulse on where we are? Do we want to go for both? Are we just spinning our wheels? Should we just look at the override, if that is where everybody, at least in the last time we spoke, everybody's heart was a need?
Thank you, Mike. So are you requesting an agenda item that would be committee priorities and recommendations?
Yes, if that's what the needs.
Well, to continue what we're doing, we would need a critical needs bond for the next 1 to 5 years. And to maintain what we're doing now, in the process, we need to set up that committee to determine whether we're consolidating schools. I kind of think we need both.
This is Melissa Briggs. I think that we need to put it on the agenda, as Michelle recommended, because I don't think we can rule out a comprehensive bond just yet, basing on the numbers that we just looked at, with Liberty being at 131% of utilization. I don't think combining schools is going to alleviate that. And so I do think it needs to be an agenda item.
This is Patty Buckram. I believe, yes, let's add this to the agenda for the next meeting. I think time is of the essence. If we're only going to be able to meet 2 more times, and the governing board needs to have this by the last May meeting, we need to have our act together, if you will, so that the board will have something to vote on. So hopefully we can accelerate some of our discussions.
This is Annette McCarty. Can we add additional meetings since we're doing this format? We're all at home. Can we have a additional Wednesday meeting next week? And if we were on an every 2-week schedule?
We can certainly add a meeting if that's the board's request. I do believe we have a meeting next week, and let me confirm that for the committee. We do have a meeting scheduled for next week, and we could certainly add a meeting. The meeting after April 22nd is scheduled for May 13th. Could add a meeting in between those 2 meeting dates if the committee would like to do that.
That would be good.
I motion, this is Kirk Hobbs, I motion that we add an additional meeting.
I second.
This is Rick. I would second as well. We got to have more meetings, guys.
I'll add that meeting.
Do we need to take a vote? Because I would vote aye.
Technically, it's not agendized as far as adding a meeting. We can certainly agendize that and vote next week, and we would then add the meeting after the April 22nd meeting. May I suggest that we take that approach, and I'll agendize it as meeting schedule, remaining meeting schedule, and the addition of new meetings?
Thank you.
That sounds good. Cheryl, can we come back to your original question, which I think was a request for additional information? Is that correct? Michelle, did you hear me?
You cut out, sir. Do you mind repeating that question? I'm sorry.
Sure. Did you have a question on the table of is there a request for additional information?
In what regard for additional
Well,
information?
I thought that was your way you started this, was to say, is there a request for additional information? The reason why I asked is because I think Mrs. Beltran had asked for that report, and you said that it was with the administration, but you didn't say that it was that we could actually get a copy of it. And maybe Patty, you can remind us of what actual report you're asking for.
I was asking for their comprehensive report, not just the PowerPoint slides, because I believe, excuse me, I believe that provides the additional detail that we were asking.
Yeah, and as both Dave and Molly mentioned, the additional facility assessment report is hundreds and hundreds of pages and spreadsheets. That information's with Mr. Dogood, as well as the final utilization report. The intent today was to align the summary information to the presentation. That information is available, but it may be that a new committee would work through that full report. Your request is noted, but it might be outside of the scope of this committee's work.
Michelle, this is Annette McCarty. As far as additional information for the next meeting, could the Stifle put together the numbers on the tax rate, what it would look like with the 1 to 5, a 1 to the numbers with 1 to 5, the numbers with a 1 to 10, because I think the 1 to 10 are actually the the time span that we can spread those out. And then one more line being the comprehensive of 1 to 5 and the new high school, since we are over capacity, nearing capacity at all high schools.
So I'll add an agenda item for updated tax rates related to those timelines that align with the presentation that was provided today, and we'll have that for the committee.
Michelle, this is Patty Beltram again. Forgive me, committee. But I believe there was going to be a presentation at some point in reference to technology needs. Since that was the last bond that passed was a technology bond. Is that data going to be presented in the next meeting?
Yes, it is. In fact, Mr. Gay's department has been working on that information and is planning to be joining our meeting. We will also have transportation needs available as well. Both of those items were going to be on the agenda.
Hi, this is Danielle. I was wondering if we could get some information about the best, worst case. I know everybody's guesstimating what the state budget, all of that kind of stuff is going to look like, but they've also been talking about the cuts that are going to be coming for education. I think one of the committee members was making some comments that brought to my attention it's really hard to be asking taxpayers and voters for money when the rest of us are not getting enough or having enough, and that's why we're getting some help. So basically the point was, is there a way to do worst case scenario of what the projections of budget might be in the future with everybody's magic ball?
We can certainly agendize fiscal 2021 budget update for the committee at the next meeting.
Thank you.
Hey, Michelle, this is Rick. I'd like to follow up with Annette's suggestion that the 1 to 5 year tax impact and the 1 to 10 year tax impact and a comprehensive tax impact. I think those need to be made in the context of an overall tax impact where you have to go back in and add the additional taxes associated with an override. And that would mean that you guys would have to also guess at an override level, presuming we stay at 13%, we raise to 15%, or we lower to some unspecified number at this point. So in addition to the bond tax impacts, do you think you guys could throw in something related to overrides as well, so that you have a comprehensive number that the public would look at?
Yes, we can include that.
Okay. I think that goes back to Mike's points about, the virus has certainly impacted a lot of people adversely, and what PUSD comes out asking for will, that perception is going to be an important thing to consider as well, I think.
Okay, are there any other requests? All right, well, that moves us to agenda item number 7, which is adjournment.
Well, I suggest we adjourn and get back to other things we got to be doing.
I second.
For Marcy's benefit with the minutes, would you mind sharing who made the motion in the second, please?
I apologize. This is Rick. I move we adjourn the meeting.
This is Danielle. I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? All right, well, thank you very much. I hope everyone has a safe evening, and thank you for your time today, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Take care. Be safe.
Bye.